Hello, welcome. This is Christian here. So in this video, we're going to continue from the previous video, when I talked about objects and classes and polymorphism and so on. So now that we understood what these are, right, and how classes and objects are, let's go into the code and how we can translate this to code. Okay, again, the UML here, it really helps to give you an idea of how to code. So if you had never used it before, I highly encourage you to, look into it and then see how they are used. But really, really helpful. Okay, so let's go into the program. I'm in Visual Studio, and this time instead of going to the MVC form, I'm just going to go right into just build a console application so that we have a good understanding of how object-oriented works, right? Before we go into the MVC. So I'm going to go and create a new project. This time I'll be creating just a console application. Okay, so you can go to the C#. We'll use C#. You can select the app core or the app console.NET framework. Okay, and we'll call this just a OOP example. Okay, then just click OK. All right, so before we get here, I want to do just a few examples first with the IDE here. And also, if you have never used C# before, I highly encourage you to look into that a little bit more. If you have used Java or C++, this will be very similar in many ways. But if you haven't, then you want to look into that and do a little bit of reading. Okay, so here is a typical application in C#. Okay, so it looks very similar to Java, by the way. Even the names are very, very similar. So you have up here, these are called, using means that you're importing these modules. Really, these are special classes that are needed to make this program work. Okay. The namespace here, and then you have OOP example. That is the name of your project, right? Okay, so this namespace here is synonymous to the package in Java. So basically, it organizes all your C# files under the same project, so they can access each other. Okay, so right now it's using the namespace OOP example. If I have another class created, then it will also have the same namespace, so that this program called program can reach it. Okay, and then inside the namespace, I have a class called program. Yeah, this is the main program, and it has a main entry point called a function called main, just like Java. And my program starts right here. Okay, so this is how you would write your code. It's object-oriented. You must have a class, and a class must have a starting point. In this case, it's always through the main method here. Okay, so inside here is where everything begins. So if I wanted to write something really easy simple to the console, I'm going to use the console write. If you type in write, you have two options, the right and the right line. One is you will leave the print head at the end of the output, like for the write. And the right line is after you output the data to the screen, you move your print head to the next line, so you form a new line. So usually I prefer to use that one. So we can say, hi there world, right? Just put the message out there, and so we can read it. We can see it. And I'm going to save this. Not sure what this error means. I already have that. Okay. Okay, so if I save that and run this application, if I click Start and Run, and Visual Studio is a little bit different from like other IDEs. The thing is that if you run like this, it's gonna go really fast and you can't see the screen. It will just show you like a few milliseconds and then it goes away. Okay, it's lagging, that's why you see that, but you see that it goes away. Okay, so you don't even see the output here. Okay, so if that happens, you can do one of two things. One is you can say console, and this is not recommended, but console write, read. If you do a read, then it will pause and it will wait for a read from the input. So if I click start again, and now it should stop. It should pause. Okay, as you can see, it pauses it, and it's waiting for an input. So what you can see the hello world here, right? So the message is printed to the console here, so we know that's working. And if I hit enter, then it closes that, because it reads that and it closes it. Okay, that's one way. Another way is if you go to the debug menu and click the second option, it says start without debugging. Okay, or you can press Ctrl F5 for the shortcut. If you do that, it will run and it will pause until you press any key to continue. So you see the message here, hi the world, and then you can either close it or press Ctrl or any key to stop it. Okay, so this is how you would write your code, a classical program, and then the main method here. And C#, when you create variable names in here, these are local variables inside a function, right? I have to specify the data type. So if I want to say a string, if I want to put this into a string, a variable name, okay, I would use a string and I'll call it message, okay, equals that string. And I'll just copy this, put it in there. Okay. Put it right in there if it lets me. Come on, you can do it. Oh boy, okay. It's not responding, but well, wait. It's doing something in the background. I have not a lot of RAM, I suppose. Alright, so here we go. I pasted it out there. Every statement must be terminated with a semicolon, just like Java. And then here, I'm going to write the message out. So, very common way to output data. Save that. Again, go to debug, and then start with the debugging, and you will see the same message out here. Okay. So that is how you do in C#. So again, you put the data type first, followed by the identifier, and you can either assign a value or you don't. You assign later if you want to, right? You could do like a int for integer, number, and leave that blank. Int a number, maybe 1 and 2, I suppose, 1 and 2, right? And then after that, I can say number 1 equals 12, number 2 equals 10. Okay, and then you can create another sum. Int sum equals number 1 plus number 12, right? 2. And then you can say a message here. I'm going to say something else complete now. The total is, and then you put that there, the message, and then the plus is the concatenator. You can concatenate two strings together. Is, and then I put I put the plus the sum, right? So it said the total is, and then whatever the sum is. So if I save that, debug, run it, and the total is 22. Okay, so that's how you do it. And of course, you can also combine these together. Just put a comma here like that, and you created two variables, and they both assign different numbers here. I think you can even do this, 12, and then 13 here like that. So you can do that too, if you want. But I mean, kind of not recommended, but you can. And as you can see, if you run, it should still be fine. Just different ways of what you can do in the code. Okay. So these again are local variables. that we also have global variables. Okay, global variables are variables or identifiers that are outside of any class. So I have a function called main. Okay, and then outside of this, I'll put a variable outside here in the class space. This is the class space, or we call this the global space. Okay, it has many names. Global space. Well, these are also called fields. Okay, or data fields. A lot of names. Or we call this instance variables. Okay, so they all kind of mean the same thing if they are in the class space. So I could put the string instead of here, I'll put it out here. Okay, so now it's outside of that class. I mean that function. You have a squiggly line here. It says object is referencing a non-static field, and we'll talk about this later. It has to do with this word static here. Okay, there's some rules in object-oriented programming, especially C# and Java, is that if it's a function and if it uses this static keyword in front of it, that means it can only access any data in the global space here only if it is also had the same word static attached to it. So if it puts static like that, then that's fine, right? If it's not, then it's called an instance field. Okay, instance means in order to access it, you must create an object out of it first to use it. And again, we'll do more examples of those. But for now, let's just say I put this in the global space. So this message is available everywhere in the program here, in the class here, right? And if you run this again, it will just still be fine. The total, we can say the sum is, right? Just to make it a little bit different. So the sum is 25, okay? Right here. So now I can write another function down here. Must be static because if I'm going to call directly from here, then I have to call it here. So if I create a function of type static, it's going to be returning the sum of these two numbers, right? So it's going to be both integer type. So I put the data type here, and then the name of the function is going to be, I just say get sum. Okay. I think by convention in C# you use like capital letters for these. I'm so used to using the camel case because I'm a Java programmer, right? So you usually use a lowercase here. Okay, but C# I think they use like the uppercase get some. It's kind of confusing because usually classes are named that way. So you have the Pascal case here, and if you have the same function with that, it's a little bit confusing. But we can use either way you want. There's no rule really. It's just that it is a convention you have to follow, and that will make your code consistent with all other programmers' code. So get function, get sum, and I'm going to pass in two parameters, so num1 and num2, right? So here I have to have the data type of num. Let's go n1 and n2, and then I'll return the sum, which is just n1 plus n2. Okay. And then now the sum here, then instead of saying that, I would say get sum. I'm going to pass in the number 1. In this case, it doesn't matter which order, but usually order is important. Number 2. And it will process the data and then sends it back to the sum and output that. Okay, so we put like a different number, and it should get a 46 in that case. Okay, so now this function here is another function, and because the message is in the global space, I can access that directly from here too, if I want. So for example, if I put these two numbers out in the global space also, right, put that out there. And again, I'm going to make this static so they can be accessed from the static functions. So I pass the static numbers to that function, and I do the process just like before. Nothing changes. But since they're in the global space, so in other words, I don't have to pass those two guys to that function, and I don't need any parameters here because I can get them directly from up here. So in here, I'll just say number 1 plus number 2, right? And because they're global, I can access them anywhere. So I hope you're aware of the global variables. And you'll see that the output will still be the same as before, 46. Okay. Okay, so these are global variables. This is a local variable because I cannot get sum from here. I can't say sum equals, as you can see, it doesn't exist, right? It is not visible. If I type in sum, you won't see it. Okay, because it's not global. If I type in message, it's in a global space, so it's available. Okay, so that's local and global variables. Again, these are data fields.